When people think of love, they often imagine romance as timeless, that no matter how old we are, we can always fall in love again, we can always start over, and we can always recapture the magic of companionship. And in some ways that's true. Human beings are wired for connection, and even at 70, 80 or 90, the desire for closeness never fully disappears. But what many seniors discover, sometimes painfully, is that remarriage late in life can bring with it a set of challenges far greater than the joy it promises. In fact, senior life experts have begun to warn that after 70, remarriage is often less about new beginnings and more about opening doors to struggles you may not be ready for. This isn't about being cynical or dismissing love. It's about understanding reality. Because while companionship and intimacy are beautiful at any age, the institution of marriage, especially a second or third one, comes with baggage, financial risks, family conflicts, health challenges, and emotional strains that can undo the peace you've worked so hard to build in your golden years. And that peace, let's be honest, is precious. After decades of working, raising families, surviving hardships, and navigating loss, your 70s should be about enjoying the fruits of wisdom, not re-entering a battlefield disguised as romance. So let's explore the first shocking reason experts caution against remarriage after 70: financial vulnerability. Money may seem cold compared to love, but it is one of the biggest stressors in late-life unions. By the time someone reaches 70, their finances are usually structured around retirement income, savings, pensions, and healthcare needs. These resources are carefully balanced to last for what remains of life. But remarriage can complicate everything, changing entitlements, altering social security benefits, affecting inheritance plans, and even sparking legal battles with adult children. Imagine this. You've worked for decades, paid into a retirement fund, and built a modest savings. You remarry thinking it's just about companionship, but suddenly your assets are legally bound to someone else. If that person has debt, financial obligations, or children who expect an inheritance, your life savings may no longer be secure. Many seniors have discovered too late that love blinded them to the financial entanglements of marriage. They thought they were gaining a partner, but what they really gained were liabilities. It doesn't end there. Taxes, property rights, and medical expenses can become tangled webs. For example, if your new spouse falls ill, you may become legally responsible for their healthcare costs, potentially draining your nest egg. Even if your own children have plans to help care for you, those resources might now be split or redirected. Experts repeatedly emphasize that while companionship can be found in many forms, marriage ties your financial future to another person's in ways that may undermine your security. At 70, that risk is not small, it is enormous. But financial vulnerability is only the first reason. The second shocking reality seniors face when remarrying is family conflict. Picture this. You've built a life, raised your children, maybe even have grandchildren, and now you introduce a new spouse into the mix. On the surface, it sounds like a new chapter. But beneath the surface, resentment, suspicion, and rivalry often brew. Adult children may worry about losing inheritance, grandchildren may feel displaced, and long-standing family traditions may suddenly feel fractured. It's not always malicious. Sometimes children fear their parent is being taken advantage of. Other times they simply feel protective of family history, struggling to welcome someone new into a space that feels sacred. But regardless of intent, the reality is that remarriage after 70 often sparks battles that fracture families. Holidays become tense, estate planning turns into war zones, and the elderly parent, who only wanted love, is left heartbroken by division. One heartbreaking story I once heard involved a 75-year-old woman who remarried after her husband's death. She believed her children would understand, but instead they grew distant. Her new husband's children also resented her, seeing her as an intruder. What was supposed to be a union of companionship became a source of constant stress. She spent her final years torn between two families that never blended. And this is not an isolated case. Experts report that blended families after 70 rarely achieve harmony. Instead, they often ignite jealousy, suspicion, and distrust. Family conflict also seeps into caregiving. Who takes responsibility when health declines? The biological children? The new spouse? The stepchildren? In many cases, no one agrees, and the elderly person suffers most. This is why experts say remarriage at 70 is like lighting a match in a room full of dry paper. It may spark warmth, but it can just as easily set the whole room ablaze. Then there is the third shocking reason: health and caregiving burdens. At 70 and beyond, health is no longer a side issue, it is central. Even the healthiest senior knows that medical challenges are part of aging. Entering a new marriage at this stage often means taking on the role of caregiver, or expecting someone else to do the same for you. On the surface, this may sound noble, in sickness and in health, but the reality is far more grueling. Imagine being 72, newly remarried, and then suddenly facing the responsibility of caring for a spouse with dementia, cancer, or mobility issues. Instead of enjoying freedom and companionship, you become a full-time nurse, sacrificing your own limited years of independence. Conversely, if you are the one who falls ill, your new spouse may not have the strength, patience, or even the willingness to support you. After all, they didn't build a life with you for decades. They joined late, and sometimes their commitment falters under the weight of illness. Experts warn that unlike first marriages in youth, remarriages in old age don't come with the same stamina. Caregiving is exhausting, and many late-life unions crack under its pressure. Worse still, families often disagree about caregiving roles, leaving the elderly caught between guilt, obligation, and resentment. This isn't the romance people dream of at 70. It's a reality few are prepared to face. And so, when you step back and look at these first three reasons, financial vulnerability, family conflict, and health burdens, you begin to see why experts raise alarms. Remarriage after 70 is not just about love. It's about legal, financial, emotional, and physical consequences that can dramatically reshape the final chapter of life. Yet, here's the most shocking part. Many seniors who go down this path admit later that they didn't fully think it through. They followed their heart. And while that's admirable, they overlooked the reality that late-life marriage is not just a union of souls. It's a merging of families, assets, responsibilities, and vulnerabilities, and sometimes that merging does more harm than good. Still, this is only the beginning. Because beyond money, family, and health, there are even deeper reasons why remarriage after 70 may not bring the joy you expect. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore the emotional and psychological challenges, as well as the subtle ways remarriage can rob you of the peace you worked a lifetime to earn. Now we've already looked at three major reasons experts caution against remarriage after 70: financial entanglements, family conflicts, and the heavy burden of health and caregiving. Each of these alone is enough to give pause, but together they paint a picture of how complex and even risky a late-life marriage can be. But there's another dimension to this story, one that often gets overlooked because it's less visible, yet just as destructive: the emotional and psychological toll of remarriage in later years. This is the fourth shocking reason why experts say don't do it. At 70, you've spent decades forming habits, routines, and ways of living. You know what you like, you know how you manage your space, and you've built a rhythm of independence, even if you've been widowed or divorced. Remarriage requires blending two lives, two personalities, and two sets of habits all over again. At first, it might feel exciting, sharing meals, traveling together, filling the loneliness. But soon the reality sets in: compromise. And compromise at 70 is not the same as compromise at 25. When you're younger, compromise feels like building a life together, like shaping a home from scratch. But at 70, compromise can feel like dismantling the peace you finally earned. Suddenly you're negotiating about television channels, bedtime routines, diet choices, finances, even how to spend weekends. What once was freedom, choosing for yourself, setting your own pace, becomes a constant negotiation. For many seniors, this shift isn't worth the cost. They find themselves wondering, did I trade my independence for another set of arguments? Beyond the practical conflicts lies the deeper emotional weight of expectation. When someone remarries at 70, they often bring unspoken hopes that this person will heal the loneliness, that they will recreate the intimacy of the past, that they will provide comfort until the very end. These expectations, though natural, are often unrealistic. A new spouse cannot resurrect a lost partner, nor can they fill every void. When reality fails to meet the dream, disappointment sets in. Experts report that late-life remarriages often struggle with silent resentments, as each partner quietly feels let down by the other. There's also the issue of identity. By 70, you've become who you are. You've cultivated routines, preferences, and even quirks that make you uniquely you. But remarriage forces identity to bend. Suddenly, you're not just yourself. You're part of a couple again. That means aligning schedules, blending social lives, and sometimes even reshaping values. For some, this feels enriching. For others, it feels suffocating. Seniors often underestimate how much personal freedom matters to them until it's gone. One senior, a 78-year-old man, once described it this way: "I remarried because I was lonely, but after a year, I realized I had lost the best part of my old age, my freedom. I had routines that brought me peace. I had quiet mornings, long walks, my books, my music. Suddenly everything became a negotiation. I wasn't lonely anymore, but I also wasn't at peace. I wish I had chosen friendship instead of marriage." And that brings us to a powerful truth. Companionship does not require marriage. Seniors often conflate the two, believing that to avoid loneliness they must remarry. But deep, fulfilling companionship can be found through friendship, community groups, travel clubs, volunteer work, or even living arrangements designed for social engagement. Marriage is only one path, and arguably the most complicated one. Experts often encourage seniors to explore companionship without legally binding themselves, so they can retain freedom while still enjoying closeness. But beyond the emotional adjustments of remarriage, there's one more shocking reason to reconsider: the risk of losing peace in your final years. This is the fifth and perhaps most profound warning experts share. After a lifetime of working, raising families, enduring hardships, and surviving loss, your 70s and beyond are meant to be a chapter of peace. This doesn't mean isolation. It means living with balance, dignity, and self-determination. Remarriage, while promising romance, often disrupts that peace. Think about it. You may have already spent decades managing conflict, compromise, and responsibility in a marriage. Why repeat the cycle at 70? Why give away the gift of independence you've earned? Many seniors find that once they remarry, their days fill once again with obligations, expectations, and even new worries. Instead of serenity, they encounter turbulence. Instead of peace, they find themselves entangled in family disputes, health crises, or financial struggles, not originally their own. This isn't to say that love itself is a mistake. Far from it. Love, affection, and connection are vital at every age. But marriage, as an institution, carries legal, financial, and emotional bindings that can weigh heavily in later years. Experts argue that the risks far outweigh the benefits, and that seniors can and should pursue intimacy in ways that preserve peace rather than compromise it. One of the most haunting stories I've come across involves a 74-year-old widow who remarried against her children's advice. She thought it would give her security. Instead, her new husband's health declined rapidly, and she spent her final years as his full-time caregiver, drained of energy, financially stretched, and emotionally exhausted. She admitted on her deathbed that she regretted remarrying, not because she didn't care for him, but because she realized she had surrendered her final years of freedom and tranquility. It's a sobering reminder that peace is fragile, and once disturbed, it's hard to recover. At 70 and beyond, peace may be the most valuable currency you have. More than money, more than possessions, even more than romance, peace of mind is what allows you to truly savor the time you have left. And remarriage, experts warn, too often robs seniors of that peace. So now we have uncovered all 5 shocking reasons: financial vulnerability, family conflict, health burdens, emotional strain, and loss of peace. Each of these alone is compelling. Together, they form a powerful case against remarriage after 70. But the story doesn't end there. Because while experts caution against remarriage, they also offer hopeful alternatives, ways to build love, intimacy, and connection without giving away freedom. In the next section, we'll explore those alternatives, how seniors can cultivate fulfilling relationships, protect their independence, and embrace life with joy, all without the risks of remarriage. Because while love may not fade with age, wisdom teaches us that how we pursue it matters more than ever. By now it's clear why experts so strongly caution seniors against remarriage after 70. Financial strain, family conflict, health burdens, emotional compromises, and the loss of peace are not abstract possibilities. They're lived realities for countless older adults who thought remarriage would be the cure for loneliness, only to discover it introduced far more problems than it solved. But this doesn't mean the story ends in despair. On the contrary, what life experts emphasize most is that there are better alternatives to remarriage, paths that lead to intimacy, fulfillment, and connection without the entanglements that often destroy peace. One of the most powerful alternatives is deep friendship. We underestimate how healing and enriching true friendship can be, especially in later years. A best friend can provide laughter, shared experiences, emotional support, and even companionship in travel or daily life, all without the weight of legal obligations or the risks of merging finances and families. In fact, research has shown that strong social bonds are more predictive of happiness in old age than marriage itself. The quality of relationships matters more than their form. Consider the story of two widows who chose not to remarry, but instead became lifelong companions. They traveled together, supported each other through health challenges, and even lived in the same senior community. Their families respected their bond, because it didn't come with the suspicions that often accompany late-life remarriage. They had all the joys of companionship without the baggage. Experts often cite examples like this to show that intimacy can flourish outside the confines of marriage. Another alternative is intentional community. Across the world, seniors are embracing new models of living where independence and companionship coexist. Some join co-housing communities, where each person has a private space but shares social areas, meals or activities. Others move into retirement villages, designed to foster connection while respecting autonomy. These settings allow seniors to avoid loneliness, while also ensuring they don't have to compromise their personal freedom. Instead of tying yourself to one spouse, you tie yourself to a supportive network of peers who share your stage of life. There's also the option of romantic partnership without marriage. Experts increasingly encourage seniors to consider relationships that are emotionally intimate, but not legally binding. This could mean dating, companionship arrangements, or long-term partnerships that don't involve merging finances or families. Such relationships allow for closeness while preserving the independence each partner has worked for. They also prevent the financial and inheritance battles that plague remarried seniors. For many, this feels like the best of both worlds, love without entanglement. A 72-year-old man once described his relationship with a woman he'd been with for nearly a decade. "We love each other deeply," he said, "but we both decided not to marry. Our children respect it. Our finances are separate, and we enjoy each other without obligation. We're together because we want to be, not because we have to be." That sense of freedom, experts argue, often leads to healthier and more joyful relationships in later years. Another key alternative is personal growth and self-discovery. While loneliness can drive some seniors toward remarriage, experts suggest turning that energy inward instead. Use the time to explore new hobbies, travel, study, or creative outlets you may have postponed earlier in life. The 70s can be a golden age of rediscovery, a chance to become the fullest version of yourself, without compromise. Investing in yourself not only reduces loneliness, but also strengthens your sense of identity, making you less likely to seek fulfillment from another person. Volunteering is another powerful antidote to loneliness. Seniors who dedicate time to helping others often report higher levels of life satisfaction and a stronger sense of purpose. Whether it's mentoring young people, supporting local charities, or participating in community projects, these activities fill the emotional void that remarriage often promises to fix. But unlike remarriage, volunteering doesn't come with the costs of entanglement. It comes with the reward of knowing your time and energy are making a difference. One of the most overlooked alternatives is strengthening family bonds without remarriage. Seniors sometimes believe that remarriage is the only way to avoid being a burden, or the only way to avoid being alone. But often, the best path is to invest more deeply in the family you already have. Instead of remarrying, spend more time with grandchildren, nurture relationships with siblings, cousins, or lifelong friends. These connections are deeply fulfilling and don't come with the risks of introducing a new spouse into the family dynamic. Experts also highlight the importance of embracing solitude. This might sound frightening, especially if you've recently lost a partner. But solitude is not the same as loneliness. Solitude is the ability to enjoy your own company, to create peace and fulfillment within yourself. Many seniors find that once they stop fearing solitude and start cultivating it, they experience a new kind of freedom. They read more, write, garden, paint, meditate, or simply enjoy the quiet beauty of life. By embracing solitude, you discover that you don't need a spouse to feel whole. You are already complete. Of course, companionship still matters. But the point experts make is that remarriage is not the only, or even the best way to achieve it after 70. By redefining what companionship looks like, you free yourself from the risks of legal, financial, and emotional entanglement. You can still experience love, intimacy, and support just on your own terms. And here lies the deeper lesson. At 70, life should not be about starting over with someone new. It should be about fully inhabiting the life you've built. Remarriage often distracts from that purpose, pulling seniors into dramas that belong to someone else's family, someone else's finances, someone else's health struggles. But choosing alternatives, friendship, community, companionship without marriage, personal growth, keeps your final chapter centered on your own values and joys. Experts remind us that the goal of aging is not to replicate youth. It's not about pretending you're 30 again and diving into the same commitments. It's about harvesting wisdom, savoring peace, and living with intention. Remarriage after 70 often undermines these goals, while alternatives enhance them. The choice then is not between loneliness and marriage. It's between losing peace and preserving it. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the psychology of seniors who remarried and regretted it. What did they experience? What lessons did they learn? And how can their stories guide others to make wiser choices? Because sometimes the most powerful warnings don't come from experts. They come from those who lived through it themselves. While research and expert opinion provide a strong foundation for understanding the risks of remarriage after 70, sometimes the most powerful insights come from lived experience. Across the world, countless seniors have walked down this road, hoping for love and companionship, only to find disappointment, conflict, or heartbreak waiting on the other side. Their stories illuminate the realities behind the warnings, and they often speak louder than statistics. Take the case of Margaret, a 74-year-old widow who remarried a man she had known casually from her community. At first, the companionship felt wonderful. She was no longer eating dinner alone, no longer facing holidays in silence. But within 2 years, Margaret realized she had inherited a lifetime of his baggage. His adult children resented her, believing she was after their inheritance. Family gatherings turned tense, and Margaret often felt unwelcome in her own home. She had hoped remarriage would add joy to her golden years, but instead it added stress. Looking back, she admitted, "I thought marriage would cure my loneliness, but it only gave me a new set of problems." Then there was David, who remarried at 71 after meeting someone at church. For a while, things were peaceful, but when David's health began to decline, he found that his new wife's patience was limited. She had her own health struggles, and caring for him became overwhelming. Instead of growing closer, they grew resentful of one another. David later confessed to a friend, "I would have been better off hiring help and leaning on my children for support. Instead, I tied myself to someone who wasn't ready to carry the weight of illness." Stories like these are not rare. Experts often hear from seniors who admit that remarriage, rather than solving loneliness, amplified it. Instead of feeling supported, they felt trapped in someone else's family drama, someone else's medical crises, someone else's financial mess. And for many, it was nearly impossible to untangle themselves once they realized their mistake. Divorce in later years is financially devastating, emotionally draining, and socially isolating. Some seniors endure unhappy marriages simply because they don't have the energy or resources to end them. But these cautionary tales are not meant to discourage hope. They are meant to guide it, because for every Margaret and David, there are seniors who found joy without remarrying. There are those who chose deep friendships, who cultivated hobbies, who traveled the world, who poured love into their grandchildren, who built supportive communities around them. Their lives remind us that fulfillment is not tied to marital status. It's tied to perspective and choice. The key lesson from both experts and lived experiences is this: after 70, you must protect your peace as fiercely as your health. Peace of mind, peace of spirit, peace of home, these are treasures too valuable to gamble on a remarriage that might compromise them. Companionship is important, yes, but it should never come at the cost of your independence, your financial security, or your emotional stability. So when seniors ask life coaches, therapists, or even their peers whether they should remarry, the advice is almost always the same: think twice. Ask yourself what you are truly seeking. Is it love? Is it companionship? Is it relief from loneliness? Once you understand the need, you may find that marriage is not the best or even the wisest solution. There are healthier, freer, and more joyful paths to the same destination. In the end, what matters most in your 70s and beyond is not whether you have a spouse, but whether you are at peace. Peace with your choices, peace with your family, peace with your finances, peace with your health, and most importantly, peace within yourself. Because happiness at 70 does not come from repeating the commitments of your 30s. It comes from honoring the wisdom of your years and protecting the life you've built. And that is why senior life experts continue to say, with confidence and compassion, remarriage after 70 is not the solution. In fact, more often than not, it is the problem. So take their advice and the advice of those who have lived it. Seek companionship, seek love, seek joy, but do it on your own terms. Cherish friendships, nurture family bonds, explore new passions, and embrace the independence you've earned. For at this stage of life, the greatest gift you can give yourself is not another marriage, but the freedom to live exactly as you choose.